Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the JTM Community Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Melvin. If you are watching this, you already know who our guest today is, as she is a frequent flyer, dare I say, co-host at this point in the game. If you are listening to this, we will get into that in just a moment. If you want to chat with me for advancement advising, you can do so at j-tm.community/podcast, where you can also find all of the links to all of our social media, Spotify, YouTube, all of that's there on the top right-hand side. If you're looking for additional resources, either local to the Mount Pleasant, Michigan area, you can also find them on the main site as well as national resources. Without further ado, Shay, or for those who may be seeing you for the first time, Meshayla, who is, again, I'm going to just say a co-host at this point. She
Yeah.
is, well, actually, she had just made a recent change, so I'll let you share that particular news. You're looking like, what did I just do?
What was the recent change I made?
Within the last few weeks.
Oh,
Okay,
so
there it is.
yeah, same job, just different floor. Same
Yep,
job, just different floor.
different
So
place. So Shay
now I got to
has
work with kids.
Shay has been largely in the medical field, as well as a part-time therapist slash bartender. So,
Yeah.
what is the recent change that you had made for folks who don't know?
So for my nurse tech position through my nursing program, I moved from a cardiac telemetry floor to the pediatric ICU at our local hospital.
Which is a change. I'm guessing most people know what pediatric ICU is. What is the telemetry floor?
The telemetry floor is just usually people who have had heart surgery, heart attacks, any heart problems, really. So the telemetry part is just their rhythm is being watched constantly.
Okay, so it's heart focused.
Yes.
Nice. What a beautiful transition into our topic today. So the topic that we, as you know, that we will be chatting about is joy. So when you think of joy, what does that mean to you?
Joy is like the innocent form of happiness. And
Okay.
so, because
You saw my face.
always talks about happiness and what makes you happy, and you could say it's specific things and you lead up and you're always chasing happiness, but I feel like joy is just kind of a feeling that sneaks up on you.
Okay.
And isn't as sought after, but it just kind of sneaks up on you, and it's just kind of it's joy. It just
Is that what you meant?
Lighter feeling, I feel like, than happiness.
Is that what you meant by innocent? Is that it's not something that's necessarily sought, it just kind of more so happens?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's more noticed when at least for me, like if I'm sitting somewhere and I'm like, oh, I feel joy right now. Like
Yeah, no, I get that. I think for me, there's kind of three different things. So people talk about happiness, and I think happiness is closer to the idea of pleasure. So pleasure is very temporary, like it's within a moment. It's a physical response to a thing. So dopamine causes pleasure. That's literally like the pleasure principle of why we feel that way, which a lot of people would equate like that sense to being happy. For me, and my understanding and how I view the world is through the lens of joy. So for me, joy is more of a perception. Like you can do a difficult thing and be joyful. You can be in a difficult position and like have the lens of joy within that. It's kind of like the idea of seeing blessings or silver linings. It can be in big things, but for me, joy is in like the day-to-day things. Pleasure is in the big things, like boom, you graduated from a program, right? So there's like that hit of pleasure. For me, joy is is literally the day to day right now, right? Like these experiences, I look forward to them. So that is the, like, for me is the pleasure side of it, right? The happiness. But just doing this and like working on these things, or whether it be the job or the intentionality of having communication, the that for me is joy. So I think what you're saying and what I'm saying are largely actually pretty similar
Hmm.
versus or versus more different, but they are slightly different, I feel like.
Yeah, there is a little bit. Whereas I see them kind of as synonymous, happiness and joy as
Enjoy.
well. It just kind of that slight difference between them of it being kind of you look for the happiness, which is also what you said, and then um, joy is kind of just an added part to the happiness.
Yeah, because I feel like, and correct me if this sounds like bullshit, is happiness. I feel people chase it, or you'll hear people say things like, "Well, that makes me happy," or "They make me happy," or "That doesn't make me happy." Right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus joy isn't like a cause. Like this thing doesn't make me joyful. I choose to have the lens of joy, right? To view things in a joyful manner, versus yeah. So I guess as I'm saying that, my brain's breaking it down into almost two things, where joy is almost like a proactive mindset versus happiness is a reactive response to
Yeah, I
things.
feel like that's a good way to explain it.
So, with that being said, can you think of the most recent time where you had a sense of joy compared to a sense of happiness?
Mhm.
You seem kind of joyful right now, if I'm being honest.
It, the sun's out and it's warmer than 60 degrees right now.
Oh,
So
nice.
that's a sense of just overall joy
Mhm.
of kind of it started out really cloudy this morning and I wore sandals today as like hopeful that it wouldn't rain. And then when I came out of my classes and I saw it was sunny out, I was like, ah, well, look at that. So
Nice.
yeah. um but I think I had a really like profound sense of joy when Branson and I had our anniversary dinner a couple weeks ago
Hmm.
for our 5 year. And we're just sitting at dinner and we were kind of just sitting in like content silence, sipping on our drinks. And we had just talked about like how much we've grown in the last 5 years and what we look forward to in the next five. We kind of just sat there and it was like just a good feeling of joy to be there and kind of just, that content silence was really nice that we are like, yeah, this is good. Life is good kind of feeling.
Absolutely. Kind of just being in the presence of each other in celebration of a thing, which essentially is your growth. At the same
Mhm.
time, looking forward to your growth over between now and 5 years from now. Can I ask,
Mhm.
when you guys were having the conversation of the next 5 years, what, because you said you had this sense of contentment and joy, like what came out of those conversation, or that conversation rather?
Just kind of where we see ourselves professionally
Hmm.
and the leaps and bounds we're both going to make now that he's a couple years into his profession and um, with me finishing school and just kind of like seeing that like we're going to be able to do more things, we're going to be
Mm,
able to you know get him a truck that he wants because those are
nice.
about as much as a house now. And
Hmm.
then we've got an idea of how we're going to get a house and have somewhere to live that's our own place. And then kind of I just plans of traveling and where we want to go and what we want to do. So it's nice to have those kind of conversations, to have
Oh
stuff to
yeah.
look forward to together.
Absolutely, things that you are like mutual goals and things that you're building towards for sure. It really
Mm-hmm.
sounds like the thought of freedom, right? Whether it's in transportation or your own home, more time in your life where
Yeah.
you're just working, you're not trying to do school and work and more work.
Yeah.
The If we rewind the clock then, because that's looking 5 years ahead, and you said there was also that sense of contentment and joy in the moment of shared silence, right? And you had mentioned the growth that the two of you had if you looked back 5 years. Can you speak on what that was?
Um, yeah. And so 5 years ago, we were both working, or about around then, working for the same company, and we both hated it, absolutely hated it. And to see him go from where not knowing what he wanted to do and with his future, and kind of just being kind of like angrily complacent because it was a paycheck, to now seeing him really flourish in what he's doing and being able to enjoy going to work most days. I know not every day is the greatest.
For sure. Yeah.
And then to see the confidence in him as well. And then for me, just making it through the many turns of school and work changes. And it's kind of nice to see where we've come from and being able to buy a real bed frame and buy a couch, and instead of having like hand-me-down stuff too. Where we started that like 5 years ago when we first got married.
Oh, sure. Yep. So really starting to kind of establish better stability and create your own things, right? Whether it's in what your life looks like a little more, or even, I mean, as you said, down to the bed frame.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big deal for us.
That's
Our bed was on the
awesome.
floor for a long time. But also we've grown a lot in like our interpersonal relationships as well, really choosing who we want in our lives and who we want for family. That's been a big part of the last 5 years as well. It's kind of navigating that and then growing closer in the process.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that has to be a tricky thing to navigate, right? Because innately by choosing who you want in your inner circle and to be your family, that by definition means you're also choosing who you don't. And that has to be difficult. I mean, removing chaos or like toxic kind of people is still very, very, very difficult.
It is. It hurts, and it's hard because you feel kind of like you're giving up almost, but you're not. You're just reprioritizing and understanding where that joy isn't at. And if you're in that, more toxic relationship, you may not see the issues in it as well. But then having kind of somebody who's a little bit more impartial kind of point it out and be like, when you come back from doing whatever with them, you're unhappy and you're not a nice person to me. And
it sounded very detailed. I'm guessing that actually happened.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it goes both ways for both of us. With friends that we've decided we're just not as close with, they're are there to support us through a lot of things. So
yeah, most definitely. And I mean, sometimes that it in and of itself takes time to figure out, right? So it's hard to get a gauge where the kinds of relationships or the depths of relationships that you have until when things are going well, people tend to be around, right? It's when things become more difficult is where you begin to get a better idea of the depth of those relationships, right? Can people be objective and support you? Are they people that just tell you what you want to know, or do they just like bounce out altogether, or do they shit talk? Kind of all of those things, which all of it's unpleasant, right? As you go through, minus the support. I mean, when life gets hard, and I know that just over the last year, you personally had a lot of things going on and random curveballs that I don't think anyone could have predicted, whether it was like family stuff or
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I feel like there's like a curveball every month almost. But the being able to handle them and keep up with stride has gotten a lot easier.
Mhm.
And I mean, my core group, especially like my core group with school, my friends that I've had since first quarter, I feel like it's if one of us is doing okay, somebody else is having a rough time, but it's, we can kind of not only support each other through like the really tough times that we have outside of school, but it's also kind of like well, shit, I guess it's your turn to have a really, really bad month. But here's how we can help you through it. Let's focus on where you're struggling. Like,
it's kind of, as you say that, it created the image of yin and yang. And are they koi fish? I think they're koi fish. You're like, I'll take your word for it.
Whatever you say.
Do you know what I'm talking about, though?
Yes, I do.
Kind of for every, there's an opposite to essentially every premise, right? Because you were saying if somebody's having a really good week or a really good month, then somebody else in the circle tends to have a month of chaos, if you will. But within that, you're able to kind of support each other. As you think, well, one, it sounds like you entering the program, and it's part of it is a large part of it, I imagine, is coincidental that you happened to enter the program when you did, and so did they. So it created a cohort of very specific people, and it sounds like you have all been a bit of a blessing for one another.
It has been, because I mean, I went into school like I'm not making any friends. I'm just going to keep to myself, do my thing, whatever. But we had this, they break us down into groups of 8 for our lab and our clinical. And in our group of 8, like it just seemed kind of more natural the first couple of weeks just to talk and kind of like, okay, game plan, this is the start of it. We're going to need to at least get a hold of each other if we have questions on stuff. And I was like, okay, we'll leave it there. And then like our third weekend, one of our people in our cohort, she had an accident during class and got severely hurt.
Oh man.
She passed out and hit her head on a concrete wall. And we didn't realize it till kind of everybody in class had cleared out. But like our lab group and clinical group that we've only known each other for a couple of weeks, like we all stayed until her husband got there to like take her to the hospital. But kind of all stayed with her and made sure she was okay. And then kind of after that was when we were like, okay, yeah, this is a solid group of people. And that kind of just that event, as we laugh about it now, but like that's kind of what created a good friendship with us.
Yeah, it was kind of the catalyst, kind of like what we were talking about, that you begin to understand the relationships you have in moments of difficulty, and that one happened very soon once you all had met. You kind of set the stage for sure. When it comes to that idea of joy, what do you think has kind of evolved or transitioned for you over the last 5 years? I mean, even with what you had just said a moment ago, which was you went into the program with that mindset and perception and attitude that I don't need and nor do I tend to make friends, right? And here you are now, where these friends are very significant and very important to you.
Yeah. I don't know if they're what all would have happened over the last 5 years to me. I think it was just growing up. I mean, I've gone from my early 20s to my late 20s, and I've said that before in the podcast, but the amount of like maturity I've gained in the last 5 years and the experiences have really shaped kind of what I want to see around me and what I want to do going forward. And a lot of that has just been a major job change, kind of meeting new people through that job and being kind of surrounded by different people within the medical field, and just moving forward through that. And then just kind of navigating through actually being married.
What does that mean, navigating through actually being married?
Well, before Branson and I started dating, I was so against being married. I thought it was such like an awful thing, because all I saw as a kid were all of like my parents, my aunts and uncles, my friends' parents, like they all hated each other, or at least seemed to hate each other in their marriages. And there was so much just like shit talking about your spouse all the time. And so I saw that and I was like, that's not cool. I don't want to.
Yeah, if that's marriage, I don't want it.
Yeah. And then seeing them talk about, well, I'm going to get divorced, and then not getting divorced because of seeing kind of the repercussions of what happens during a divorce. And so I always had the idea of, no, being married is not really worth it. It's a piece of paper. It costs more money to get out of your marriage than into it. And then probably like a year and a half into Branson and I dating, I was like, okay, I could see, wanting to be with someone for the rest of your life, and that kind of being it, when you kind of stop thinking like beyond. Or I think when you're first dating, you're always thinking of like, this is what I like in this relationship, this is what I don't like, and this is what I'll have different for the next. And then you get to the person that, yeah, you have some, like, not the greatest likes, but some of like the, oh, that's not great, but we can talk about it kind of thing. But then you stop thinking about what you want to find in the next person. There's just no next person. That's it.
And that's when it kind of clicks in. As you said that, it reminded me of when you're trying to buy a car, right? So dating would be like all the test drives. You're looking into features, right? Am I interested in this? Is it the color? Does it have the things? And every vehicle kind of has its quirks as well, right? But after you went for a year and a half test drive, you're like, hey, I think I actually might want to make a purchase here.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you did.
Exactly. Yeah, I did. Granted, it wasn't, in our stories, we got married before we were really, I'd say, ready. But it ended up being the exact perfect time for us to get married.
Like time as in like the time of a year, or like time in your lives?
Like time in our lives. Because it had to be, I don't know if I've explained it on the podcast before, but I was missing out on my next quarter of school being paid for unless we got married. And I became an independent person and not dependent on my family anymore. And because like the way the financial office was like, you got to have a baby, get married, or join the military in the next like week, and then you can get financial aid. And I went to Branson. We're having a late night dinner, and I was like, we've got to get married in the next week because I don't see myself working out in the military kind of thing. And our minds were going that way. He was just saving up for a ring to actually do the big proposal. Like he had that whole idea in mind. And so he was a little bummed that he missed out on that. But now that we've seen other people who have gotten married and gone through the big thing, we're like, oh, we didn't have to deal with that stress. It was literally the worst part was waiting in line at the courthouse to get our license. And
the worst part. I think that's a really good metaphor actually for happiness and joy, right? So the big experience would be the happiness, the actually doing of and being married, and the day-to-day, the good, the bad, the playful banter, the minor annoyances, right? All of those things go into what you're saying, to be that joy.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. It's just the complete contentment that there is. Just kind of when you sit down, you just kind of go, oh, that's the joy right there. And
where your person or your place or your home feels kind of like a sanctuary, right? Where
mhm.
being there helps you kind of relax. And sometimes it's, giving each other shit about peanut butter and jelly on gluten-free bread that was in the fridge. And,
Yeah,
and
refrigerated versus room temperature bread is a
yeah,
big
yeah.
conversation today.
We're laughing because this was literally a conversation Shay and Branson had just before we started recording,
Yeah.
which gives always is an experience of both joy and happiness for me to see you guys banter and be playful, give each other like a little bit of shit. Um, I
Mhm.
hope it's not all for show, and I don't believe that it is, but if it is,
No,
I
that's not, that
appreciate it.
is legitimately like the conversations we have, even when nobody's watching. Some of them can get a little bit weirder, just based on how comfortable we are with each other. But everybody knows that when they're with their person, that they're.
Oh, absolutely. It really
Mhm.
brings out the best and the weirdest in ourselves for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
The On that idea of joy. So when we had chatted earlier this week, or was the end of last week, I can't remember, and I had expressed what the topic was, and you said, do you remember what you said?
Mm-mm.
You
What
said,
did I?
"Oh, that might be a hard one."
Oh, yeah. I think I was having a rough day that day when you
Okay.
texted me. What day was that? Was that last?
My sense of time is so poor now.
Oh, I think it was Thursday. I was in clinical and it was just, I was tired. I was really tired
It's a
and
lot
the
going
day
on.
was rough and it was the first day I was able to take care of like all three patients we had and it would just I had mixed feelings about how I was doing. I met all of like the things we were supposed to get done on our to-do list. I feel like I could have
I
done
might be
more.
losing you, Shay.
Um, I feel like I could have done more. And so I was just a little bit frustrated about that when we were talking. So there was probably no joy in that day. I think the joy was when the day was like finally over.
Mm,
And
is
then I was
to
looking at like 3 really long days ahead of me, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
just like work related or
Yeah, it was work related. It was one of those weekends that like I agreed to working yesterday or not yesterday, Sunday, because it was this big. It's called Bloomsday, and it's where there's tens of thousands of people. Normally, there's like 40 to 50,000 people that do this 12K through
okay.
downtown Spokane. Um, and so at the bar, they were doing a special, and um, I agreed to work because we decided not to actually participate in the event ourselves.
Hmm.
And then I was kind of like, well, there goes my day off. And I had agreed to it. And then I realized, oh, I'm also working at the hospital for a 12-hour shift Saturday. And
Oh,
then I also bartended Friday night. And yeah, I just felt overwhelmed. And then,
I can only imagine.
yeah, it worked out though. I got everything done I needed to get done. Last night I had a huge to-do list and I came home and busted out like 5 things on it. So then I have less to do the rest of this week. So I feel
Reduce
like
the
that's,
stress a little bit, hopefully.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
As you have been sharing a few different stories, I feel like there's been a common denominator when we talk about joy. There's been moments of shifts. So when I had asked about 5 years ago to where you are now and things that you were explaining, so whether it was dating and being in a relationship and the idea of marriage, whether it was not wanting to create friendships, but deciding, well, I guess you didn't really decide. The life circumstance and a weird accident kind of put you in a position to create relationships of depth. You had mentioned kind of reevaluating your life, you and Branson, evaluating your lives and the people in it, and being more intentional and decisive of having specific people as you move forward. So when you were initially talking about joy, it seems to evolve that you at some point had an awareness that joy comes, for you anyway, joy comes from interactions with people, that people really help facilitate joy, or ruin it, I guess, would be the flip side, the yin to that yang.
Hmm. I think that's a good chunk of it where I do find joy. I think that's a lot in kind of like the underlying people pleaser that I am. Kind of,
Mm-hmm.
if I can give joy, I can get joy back, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. I guess that's a whole part of being in healthcare, is
Yeah.
being able to bring a little bit of joy and happiness to someone is what really will make your day.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's something small and it seems insignificant, but it's, seeing somebody's day brighten, really puts a lot of joy in my heart for that, and kind of gives me a better outlook for what I'm doing. But I'm also like sunshine is a joyful thing for me, or
Mm-hmm.
water, being near like a river, a lake, the ocean. Like that's where I don't care what's going on, I can be happy all day, every day.
Mm-hmm. Kind of the being in your element, whether it is, around water in the sun. When you said joy, it also made me think, I feel like that being in the sun, like the rays, the warmth, is almost like the tangible feeling of joy, right? I think there's even an emoji for that. It's like a sun emoji with a smiley.
Yeah.
The And not that I'm saying there's like a physical sense of warmth. Maybe there is. I have to pay
It's just
attention.
it's the vitamin D that a lot of people who
Yeah,
live up north are lacking. It's finally hitting your body, and your body's like, oh,
this is
hey.
what I'm supposed to feel like.
Hmm.
Not lethargic and depressed and haven't seen this up. It's like seeing a long lost friend, right? You're like, oh, I
Yeah.
haven't seen you in 8 months. It's nice to see you, buddy.
Right? Exactly.
The So kind of recognizing that people are really conducive to joy, or to not having like that mindset, or those experiences of joy. If I pull people away from you, can you think of the last time that you had joy, or what do you do to be mindful of like creating a joyful life that isn't people specific?
I'd say accomplishing things.
Hmm.
So finishing a book, being able to cross the last thing off on a to-do list. What else? Like finishing something. Because a lot of times I get so distracted I can't finish something, or life is so busy I can't finish something. So being able to have that accomplishment or finality on something or anything, it's always kind of a I can feel the dopamine being released in my brain when that
Yeah,
happens.
it's like the kick of happiness. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, I did it.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, now what else can I do? Like it just kind of springs you into the next thing of being able to.
Yeah, it kind of motivates you to keep going. So as you,
Mhm.
as you said that, the way you talked about accomplishing something, tell me if this is bullshit. It made me think that joy is the experience of the journey, happiness is the experience of the result.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't say that's bullshit at all.
It'd be like joy
No, no
is
bullshit.
is the experience of reading the book. Happiness would be finishing the book.
Yeah. Hmm.
I
Yeah.
like I like where we're going here, which I think is the end of that line as well, because I had no thoughts that came after that.
You're like that, and that's it. We're done.
I think for me, doing things has a very similar impact. the feeling of joy for me comes from doing things that feel like they have value or that it matters, that the impact is beyond myself. So if I'm doing like nerdy things, that's relatively like isolated or even online. So like playing a game or something, right? Like that can be a pleasant experience, but not really a joyful one. But doing this, right? Like the experience and the work of doing this, and sometimes that joy is mixed with like frustration, right? Makes it can take a lot of time and like getting things together and all the work that goes into that. But because it feels like it has value or even has the potential to have value or matter beyond myself, for me, I feel like that's what lends to the experience of joy.
Okay.
Even the idea of food, Tracy and I have actually talked about this before. Like I can eat the same thing every day, doesn't really matter. But if you guys are coming to visit, that would be unacceptable, right? Like we would grill, we would like do all of these things.
Hmm.
But for us, we don't do. And I've tried to figure this out, like why that's a thing.
Because making those different foods and stuff is something that does feel joyful to you, and then being able to share that joy with somebody else, and like, and then if you see that joy reflected back, it just only like magnifies it.
Yep.
Because just think, you don't share, you wouldn't tell somebody to read a book that you hated, or
right.
you
Yep.
wouldn't tell
Yeah,
them
I would. I actually would do that, but
just to see if they hated it too.
yeah, I would spin it. I would spin it. I'd be like, "Oh my God, Shay! Like just finished this book. It was so good. It was so good." Right?
That's just a dick move there.
Just because it would be funny. It's the same reason that a toddler goes to the bathroom and they get all excited and want to show their parents.
Oh, okay.
Right. And maybe it's the sense of pride of finishing something that was shitty.
Oh, that you stuck through the like
Yeah, maybe like that. Like, what you were talking about, like that sense of accomplishment, right?
Okay.
Because you don't really feel accomplished if a task is easy.
The task got done regardless, even if it was easy versus difficult.
So, like, if I watch,
it might be graded lesser, but
yeah, the value is less. So if I watched a movie that I enjoy, that's like I enjoyed that movie, right? Like the experience was relatively easy. Now, if I watched a movie or like a documentary that was like mentally challenging or like a thriller, I don't think it's called a thriller. It's like where there's like a ton of plot twists.
I think that's a psychological thriller.
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
And you finish that and like you like figured the thing out, or like you figured some of it out. Like it has a different like an emotional response to it. For me, anyway.
Okay. I was like, that's not something I can relate to, because I'm normally the person that doesn't get the plot twist till it's like right there.
Oh, gotcha.
Like, yeah, so you're in line with Branson, where like you sit there in a movie and you're like, this is what's gonna happen, and you say it out loud, and
Tracy
then the person who's like, who's in it just to watch it and be surprised is like, well, you're fucking right. Why are we still watching this then?
So, which I've learned over time, I just keep my mouth shut. Right. That's like I just get the joy and like I hold on to my thoughts to see if those things actually happen. Mm-hmm. Movies in that sense are actually ruined for me. It was actually a long time ago. Wow, a really long time ago. It just clicked in my head how old I was when I went to college and how old I am now, which was over half my life ago. So yeah, it's been a while. Yeah. I took a class. It was like a filmology class, and I remember the guy. He said specifically that I'm giving, and it was an elective, so I didn't have to take it. He had said, I'm giving you the chance now to drop out of my course because once you take it, it's going to ruin movies for you. Nobody believed that bullshit, right? But he was right, because once you had the experience and your mind was trained to view things in a certain way, you can't undo that. So now when I'm watching a movie, and I don't consciously think of the thing, right? But what is playing in the back of your head as you're watching a movie is what like formula makes a good movie, like on a marketing, on a developmental
So
side.
like you have to have the peak of the
Yep.
problem and then have it be solved by the end. And everybody wants like a clean, tidy ending.
Right. And like the idea of like, if this character died, like what would it do to the movie? Would it actually benefit the movie or not? Right. And if you're watching any kind of movie where there's like action, you immediately can identify the people who are fodder. Right. Like these people are only in the movie to die later.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Like they don't have any real value, which is funny that we're going full circle to again establishing that the aspect of joy is largely people related. Even when I tried to go in a different direction, we came right back to it, down to cooking food. Right. So do I like cooking food? Absolutely. And that I can experience happiness through that. But if you and Branson were here and we were going through that experience, that would be joy.
Okay. So then to flip your question on you,
yeah, please.
What do you find joy in if people were taken out of the equation? Because doing the podcast and having the community is people related.
It is. Yeah. It's the whole intent is people. Yeah. I was going to say that's a really good question, but then as my brain realized I said that, then it felt braggy. So I'm not going to say that. So for me, the thought of it makes me a little emotional. It is doing something. This sounds a little dark, but follow me.
Okay.
It is doing something that creates self-suffering, but overcoming the thing in the process of that creates joy, creates sense of competence, a sense of gratitude, a sense of achievement. It can be anything. So today I've been struggling for a while, as we all do, of getting on a better routine, and being like physically healthy it's been a thing for me for a long time now, but it comes and goes, right? Like it's always a focal point, but I struggle sometimes more than others. And the last few weeks, it's actually been a couple of months, but the last few weeks specifically, more so. And I realized, I actually had this conversation with a couple others, is that I did so much work to create a life of joy and a mindset of gratitude, that I tamed something in myself that I shouldn't have. And it didn't make me just become content, it made me become complacent.
Okay.
And when I realized that I had to actively do work so that I didn't have contentment, which transitioned to complacency, right? And you can have them separate, but for me, those two things in this moment were paired. So I needed to do old things, and not self-sabotaging. I'm not saying like trying to intentionally physically hurt myself or anything like that, but things that caused me essentially emotional or physical strife. So I was blessed when Mason and his son were doing their thing, that I was invited to be a part of that. And I injured my knee on the first day, and we had 14 miles to go still. And I was very grateful. Like, it sounds weird that I would be grateful for an injured knee, and that I had to like go through that experience. But I was immediately grateful once I knew that like I could still be mobile, right? And I just had to deal with the struggle and strife that it caused, the pain, like all of those things, the obstacles with that is what made me feel grateful. And that's what created a sense of being discontent, which I began immediately to understand like what was happening. And that feeling in that moment created that lens of joy of, okay, here, this is what it's supposed to be, right? The idea that I started doing things because they were like easy, and that when things are easy, it doesn't have the value to me.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I shouldn't say easy. I should say when they're not hard enough.
Okay.
And I know everyone's like parameter of like difficulty or what is hard. And like you were telling me a story the other day, it might have been yesterday. I could have never done that stuff. To be where you were and see the things that you saw.
Oh yeah.
Like and I'm so grateful that there's people like you and people in the field of health in that sense. But like experiencing it and like seeing it, moving on, getting through that is like I can do that. But being in it, like in it, nope. So whereas you were like excited about it, right?
I was legitimately excited.
You're excited now just thinking about it.
Yeah, because it was a learning opportunity, and it was a cool way to see something that I've been learning about. So yeah, that was a lot of joy. I was so jazzed. So
now if you take that, so you and I are actually saying the exact same thing.
It just applied to different avenues.
Yep.
So because
the situation itself your situation was horrible. Like what was actually happening was horrible. I mean, like people are not okay. Like they're physically very much not okay. But yet the experience, because of your interest, because of your training, because of your passion for others, right? Like that elicits a sense of joy, and like the way you view it is in a joyful lens. For me, in that situation, would have been the opposite of joy.
That would have been like no, don't want to finish this. But because it didn't bring you a sense of joy, had you stuck with it and saw it through, then technically, by the way that you describe joy, you would have had joy at the end for at least enduring it.
Yep. Over time. How long that would take would probably be having to go to a program and like go through and learn. So it's it's like delayed gratification, right? But again, going back to the metaphor that we were using of like reading a book, reading the book is the joy. So the learning, the experiences, that's the joy. The graduation of it, right, would have been that dopamine hit, that happiness.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. I know we've kind of gone all over the place.
We have
today, which largely is kind of people centric, and it really is difficult. Yeah, I mean, even since we've been talking about the idea of joy outside of people, for me, it's very similar. It's nature oriented. So Tracy and I talked about this. It's been a while, but when her and I first started dating, there was a hammock out back. There's a large tree and a smaller tree, and the hammock was tied in between the two. I don't know what the tree is, the small one, but in the spring and summer, you could just hear, you wouldn't see them, which was always weird to me, but you could hear bees. And I mean, like, it would sound like thousands of bees, but you could sit there in the hammock and you would just hear like the wind and the bees, and like that truly be, well, I think what I'm describing actually is bliss, rather than joy. So maybe bliss is like the next level.
Maybe. Yeah.
Or I could just be a little crazy too, but it is really hard to remove people and still even like contemplate joy, and not in the sense of that they make me joyful, but acts of service, like being a person of servitude makes me feel accomplished and competent and joyful, even if I mess up or I fall or fail, but I learn and like I adapt,
Mhm.
and all of that kind of lends to joy.
Mhm. And I think it's true. It's being able to describe it and share it with somebody else that kind of amplifies that joy, and that's why it is so people centric. It's because it's.
Oh, you just gave me a thought. I wonder if joy is the experiences we have, but when we share them and that gets like validated or reciprocated, is how we take our sense of joy and create a sense of happiness.
Yeah, I can track with that.
Because if I do
that.
a thing and it's joyful, but then I share the story or I make the meal and then I see you are like, oh, that's delicious, right? Like
Yeah.
that would be like, oh, I fucking nailed it. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Or like me coming home the other day and telling Branson about my day and having him be like happy to like happy to see me happy, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like then that, reaffirms the joy that I have and like playing off of it. But that's how it is. We mirror the people around us.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Gravy's being a stinker. I had a chip clip thing I just tossed towards him. He came over and meowed and whatnot, so I promise I was paying attention. As always, when we tend to chat, I like to ask because I truly do believe that you are very insightful and your experiences are very unique. Under the lens of joy and what we've been talking about, do you have like any last minute idea, nuggets, or words of wisdom?
I'd say don't be like, as much as I joked with each other during our conversations about what we say we find joy in, like don't be afraid of what you find joyful or what brings you happiness if it isn't directly reciprocated from somebody, because then maybe you got to rethink that relationship or understand where they're coming from. But it shouldn't stop you from doing the things that would bring you joy and happiness.
As long as they're not illegal and that they're safe.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say, as long as you're not murdering anybody.
Right. It's kind of the idea of even if somebody else doesn't agree or that it's not joyful for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay if it is for you, and it's okay to like seek those things out. I mean, just what we had mentioned a moment ago, like you in the chaos of a health situation became joyful for you, right? Which I can understand that, but I also know it would not be that for me.
Yeah.
Right? And so sometimes it might be cooking a meal or like picking fun of your partner, right? Playfully and the banter back and forth. Or
I guess I would phrase it as more as like, don't let somebody pop your bubble because they don't understand your joy. I'd say that.
Follow that. I once heard, and I can't remember where it was from. This is along the lines, but a little different. I think it's the same mindset of the best way to kill a big dream is to talk to a small person.
Yeah.
Right. And I think joy can be part of that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is part of that whole thing because people dream big, right? And it's that idea that we believe will give us joy, like in our life, right? To accomplish this thing. Steve Harvey, I think, said it. Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Shay, for joining me in our conversation this evening about joy. I know that you had a busy day, so I really appreciate you being able to sneak in and share your thoughts and your experiences.
My pleasure.
For everyone who has tuned in, thank you for being part of our community. Of course, if you want to touch base with me for advancement advising, you can do so through j-tm.community/podcast. On the top right, you can find all of our links, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, missing Facebook. So Facebook is the easiest way to communicate to the community, to engage, to vote, to share your ideas, topics, all of those things. If you give us input, you send in questions, your stories, those will absolutely appear in the podcast to varying degrees. We actually just yesterday was our first Q&A episode that aired. So, and you can do so anonymously as well. You can send us a message and saying, hey, I want to share this, but I don't want to be a name attached to that. You can absolutely do that. Last but not least, the TikTok is not necessarily about the videos that we put out. Those are more promotional in a sense, but it is about the liked videos. There's hundreds, if not thousands, in there at this point. It's all about content that will inspire, will motivate, will create human connection, make you laugh, maybe shed a tear or two of joy or gratitude. So absolutely. Thank you, Shay, for helping and being a co-host per usual. And thank you for everyone tuning in and being part of a community where you belong.